You are the CEO and co-founder of Acclinate. I'd love to hear, if you could share a bit of the inspiration for Acclinate.
Mm. Well, there's an origin story for Acclinate, and it dates back to when I was young in Atlanta. My mom was a healthcare professional her entire life, and she worked in hospitals for many years, and she got fed up with the bureaucracy in hospitals. And so then she moved to home healthcare to be closer to the patients. Unfortunately, she contracted tuberculosis in that process. And we were in and out of hospitals for about a year. And unfortunately, she passed away from the disease. And it was shortly thereafter I actually discovered there was a clinical trial in Atlanta looking for people with drug-resistant strains of tuberculosis. And as many times as we were in the hospital, we were never told. So two things emerged for me. It was better awareness about clinical trials as potential treatment options, particularly for our communities of color. And then two, knowing that even if I had presented the trial to my mom, based upon her experiences, she may have been hesitant to actually take part, understanding the mistrust that exists. So awareness and addressing mistrust are really important. And so I kind of use that as the impetus for Acclinate. And that's really what so much of our business model is built around. Today, within the US alone, the US Census Bureau says that we're about 42% racial and ethnic minority and growing. But yet, if we look at clinical trial participants, only about 5% of clinical trial participants come from a racial or ethnic minority group. And that unfortunately means that we have drugs that are being created that either don't have the same level of efficacy or have even potential negative side effects simply based upon a person's race or ethnicity. Example we will talk about a lot of times is albuterol. Albuterol is much less effective for African Americans and Puerto Ricans. And that's primarily because of the fact that they weren't involved in the clinical trials to be able to detect those differences until it got to market. And people are surprised to know that there are many drugs that are hitting the market today that when they're tested, that there are differences based upon their level of efficacy. And so, the idea is, why is that a problem? Because it's not new. And if you look at this over decades, we know that mistrust is an issue. And of course, many people talk about Tuskegee in that process, the Tuskegee study, I should say, not Tuskegee University, Tuskegee study. And that is just one example of mistrust and biases and horrible incidents that have taken place in our country that have led to people being very skeptical, particularly our communities of color. So our approach, based upon how we do this, is not to come to you and say, hey, Will, you don't know me, but would you like to be part of a clinical trial, which is what the industry has done for the longest time. But it's to come to you and say, Will, would you like to learn more about health-related issues that might be of importance to you or a family member? And it's through that process that we have engagement with you, where we get to learn about you, learn about your concerns, and we get to build trust. And there's another thing that we get from that process, and that's data. And so what we're able to do is take that trust and that data, combine it in the right platform in the right way to know when is the most appropriate time to present an opportunity to you to take part in a clinical trial. And so we're able to say, Will, for the past 4 months, you've been leaning in on this particular issue. We think you should know there's a trial going on right at insert UAB or whatever the case may be that might be of interest. And here's where you can go to find more information. And it's through that process that we have higher response rates and higher engagement and higher participation and retention of clinical trial participants. Yeah, the platform is really kind of a front-facing platform and a back-end platform. On the front-end side, we developed a what we call a movement, which is an app. It's a movement. It's a site called Now Included, and that's specifically designed to educate, engage, and empower communities of color to make informed health decisions, not for no other reason. But on the back end, what we're able to do is to be able to understand through that engagement, at what point is someone likely to want to learn more about a trial? And so we utilize some very sophisticated, algorithms and AI to help us parse through that data to know when is the most appropriate time to present an opportunity to someone to make an informed decision about participation. Anytime you're trying to scale a company, as we know that scaling a company is different from just simply starting a company and even slowly growing a company. And when we talk about scale, everything happens exponentially, right? The number of people that you sign up, in terms of employees, in terms of clients, in terms of targets and projections. And so, part of what we learned is that, there is a inertia that exists within this industry. There's an inertia that, whether we're talking about pharmaceuticals or healthcare, there's an inertia that exists sometimes in your geographic proximity and where you're located, i.e. Alabama. And there's a, and so you have these inertias that, the scale has to work against in order to actually start to see tangible results and outcomes. And so, I think the learning is that this is really hard and it is not for the faint of heart. And without the right strategy, the right support, the right investors, the right mentors, the right ecosystem, chances of overcoming that inertia and being successful is minuscule. We started the company in Huntsville when I was dean of the business school at Alabama A&M University. And so we located the company in our first office, which is still there at Hudson Alpha Institute for Biotechnology. I will tell you, I give them tremendous credit because it was about the closest thing to a supportive ecosystem as I could find in Huntsville, a place that was focused on missile defense and aerospace, right, type of thing. And then when the time came for us to know that we really wanted to expand and scale the company in a serious way, my co-founder and I got on a plane and we traveled to Houston and New Jersey and Boston. And these were like the places that are deemed as these are clinical research, biopharma hotspots. And if you're going to be serious about starting a company in this space, you want to be in this proximity. But, as we looked at those locations and we thought about many factors, one of them being traffic and cost of living and all those things, Birmingham emerged on the scene and was like, hey, what about us? Take a look here, Birmingham. We're trying to build a healthcare ecosystem. We've already got some assets here between UAB and Pac Health. And we want to focus on supporting innovative companies and also supporting women and minority founders. We believe that's important as well, too. And so we kind of checked all three of those boxes and we looked at it and said, for the next stage of our company, would it make sense for us to be in Birmingham? And could we take advantage of that? And we said, yes. But the other part to your question, Will, was when we think about where so much of this mistrust came from in the state of Alabama, the Tuskegee, study, when we looked at how challenging it is for us to move the needle on health-related issues for our communities of color, and we look at the fact of how Alabama ranks in terms of issues like cardiovascular issues, diabetes, obesity, we said, if we can make it work in Alabama, we could probably make it work in Boston and in Houston. So it was a strategic decision to say, this is where we want to plant the flag for this stage of our company. And we want to prove this model out, of course, nationwide and then eventually internationally, but what better place to prove it out than in Alabama? I spent a lot of time in the early days, and even today, people ask, like, are you around, Dale? Because you're usually on a plane and you're someplace. We have an office in DC now, so I go to a DC office twice a month. And what I will tell you from that experience of getting outside of the state and getting outside of Birmingham is it allows us to, see different ecosystems, learn from different ecosystems, connect to the benefits of those ecosystems and those resources, and to be able to leverage them here in Birmingham. And so sometimes I think the advice I tell people who are from Alabama and in Alabama and doing things in Alabama is you have to carve out time to get outside of Alabama, because, and I wonder about that sometimes as a way of thinking a little bit for the state and even, our cities, is that we don't do enough of saying, what are entities outside of Alabama doing that we may learn from? And we seem to be very much focused on internally, but then when you look at the outcomes for health in particular, you kind of start saying, is it a surprise that we're where we are ranking wise when we don't want to necessarily go outside of the state and look at what other places are doing that we can borrow from? We have some fantastic anchor institutions in Birmingham and Huntsville in the state of Alabama. I think they are cheerleaders for entrepreneurs and innovators and supportive in the sense of like, hey, we wish you the best and we know that you're important. I think where we're lacking a little bit is these institutions saying we do control a significant amount of investment. What if we carved out 1/4 of 1% of profits, not even revenue, but like profit, towards something that resembles like a skunk works type of pool or fund? And so, in Alabama Power, for example, like similar to what they're doing like with Techstars, right? They're making this investment, and if something happens and it is created out of that, they're going to hopefully be frontline to be able to benefit from that. The UAB has a similar type of approach. Of course, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Alabama can do a similar type of approach. The financial institutions can maybe take a similar type of approach when it comes to fintech or financial type of innovators. So I think it can align with the industry, but until everyone starts to adopt that, it's going to take more than just being a cheerleader to see this change. We probably won't have as quite of a supportive ecosystem here to make a significant macro and micro impact, both financially and on people's lives that we hope to see. We are growing and scaling, and we're trying to make sure that that growth and that scale is smart. As you know, any day you can wake up and have a misstep, and it could derail you, and there's risk all involved, and competitors can come in. So we are not taking anything for granted. We wake up every single day, and it's almost like it's the very first day we started the company in terms of our drive and our passion and the way that we approach things. I think what's next for us is that there's clearly an opportunity. We've penetrated a market and we've defined a business model and a niche in a space that wasn't there. So we took much part of our first 2+ years educating the industry that there's a different way of doing this. And now that the industry understands that and they're responding, there's an opportunity for us to plant our flag and say, this is the industry standard for clinical trial diversity. This is the industry standard for engaging and empowering and mobilizing communities of color and health. And then to see all the opportunities that come from that, whether it be via clinical trials, whether it be via payers, whether it be via improving people's ultimate health in terms of health outcomes. So for us, we're going to make sure we set the right goals, find the right people, bring them onto the team, ensure that we're providing valued solutions to our clients, and that we're growing in a way that is sustainable. And when we look back 2 years from now, the growth is exponential and the impact is exponential.